Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, you can sit tight and we will get started in about 5 minutes. Looks like most folks are here, so I'll give people just 1 or 2 more minutes and then we'll dig in. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about elevating and engaging youth voice. If that's the webinar that you're looking for, then you're in the right place. If not, I guess you should find where you're supposed to be. My name is Jack Kavanaugh. For those of you who don't know me, I think I saw mostly familiar names on the list of registrants, but I am our Director of Training and Program Development here at Mentor New York. A bit about my background. My background is social work. I've been with Mentor New York for about 3 years now, a little bit over 3 years. I've been working in youth programming for about 15 years between after school programs, summer camps, school-based programs, community centers, all sorts of different settings. And so, a big part of our work at Mentor New York is to help support mentoring initiatives, mentoring programs, and youth serving programs as a whole do their work more cleanly and efficiently in order to build healthy, strong relationships with the young people that they serve. And so a big part of being able to do that is about engaging with and elevating the voice of the young people that we're serving. And so we're going to talk through that today. A few housekeeping things before we start. I believe we typically schedule these around 90 minutes. I typically shoot to not fill that 90 minutes. We usually present for about an hour-ish. so that there's time for any questions or things like that at the end. If you do have questions while we're presenting, please feel free to put it in the little question box that should be at the panel on your right. If I don't get to it while we're presenting, I'll get to it at the end. You will get a copy of the slides, and this is being recorded as well for our website, so you'll be able to access all of that at the end. I will ask you at the end to fill out a brief survey just about how we did. I do review them and make tweaks based on the feedback I get, so any and all feedback is appreciated. Someone did ask me if they're having some issues with audio. Can everyone else hear me okay? You can let me know in the question box, type in, hey, I hear you. It also lets me know that you know where the question box is and that it's working. So just let me know they can hear me okay. All right, looks like other folks' audio is working, so it might just be you. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I'm glad you can hear me okay. I always feel a little silly doing these a little bit because I'm just talking into my computer. Anyway. All right, let's dig into some content. So let's start with just a quick poll how everyone's doing today. You can answer this poll one of two ways. You can go to pollev.com/JackK840. And I'll put the link into the chat, or you can use your phone to text that number. So take a second. I'm just gonna ask a few questions just to kind of get the temperature of the room. Give people a minute to get logged in. Okay, great. So a good mix. All right, I'll give people one more minute to answer. A lot of folks want it to be the weekend already. Full disclosure, that is also the answer I selected. This feels like a very long week for some reason, and I'm like, oh my God, it's only Wednesday. All right, so we're all on the same page. We're all on the same page. All right, so the next question, I'm curious about what best describes you. You run or work at a mentoring program, you're a mentor in a mentoring program, you're thinking of starting one, or you're just here kind of because you're curious and want to learn a little bit more about the topic. Awesome. So a good mix, but mostly it seems like folks run work at mentoring programs, which is good. That's just helpful for me to know. There's no wrong answer. All right. There we go. So why is youth voice important? The one thing that we know is that engaging young people in the process of our organization, of our program, creates optimal long-term outcomes, right? Part of what we're able to do by engaging young people in the decisions that affect them is make them feel more like this is a process that they are involved with, this is something that is important to them, and this is something that helps them build skills and long-term abilities in terms of self-advocacy, understanding organization, nonprofit structure, understanding, getting a sense of how to run their own programming. All of these different things are really important developments and skills for young people. with any mentoring program in general, it's really important that we make sure we understand that we want to think of the young people as part of our program, that they're active participants in this program in the same way that the mentors are. They're not just passive recipients of mentoring, right? They're active parts of the relationship. They're active pieces of the mentor relationship as well as the program itself, right? We want to make sure we're getting their feedback. We want to make sure that we're taking them seriously in the way that we're designing our program. We're not just having it be, done to them. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of, your theory of change and things like that as we go. So I talked about this a second ago, but really important for skill building and development. And it's been really nice to, be able to see young people learn and grow with their skills as we're engaging with them and building out for the program, right? We're creating leadership opportunities. We're allowing them to be self-advocates. We're helping them build their social capital by engaging with them and bringing them to meet our board members or other volunteers or staff members. We're helping them grow and expand their skills and their abilities. And lastly, it really helps focus on, our ability as a mentoring program to foster racial equity in our programs. As we think about being able to build and grow our programming and the way we talk about it and develop it, one of the things that a lot of programs have been trying to do over the past year is build pieces of this racial equity and really meet young people where they're at, particularly Black and Brown youth, predominantly when mentors and mentoring programs nationally, at least, and especially in New York, are predominantly white and not from the backgrounds that the young people themselves are from. Obviously, many exceptions to that. But a lot of programs are struggling with this issue because they see that the long history of their program has mostly involved, white privileged mentors mentoring young people of color. And there's nothing wrong with that dynamic. We want to have mentors with mentoring young people, but it does require a certain level of attention around the way that we're structuring our program, engaging with our young people, and building those relationships that we have to take really seriously. So this is just a little bit why it's important. I want to share, we've talked about this before. If you've been at any of our webinars or any of our trainings, we'll talk about the developmental relationships framework a lot. There's a lot of resources on this. I think we did almost an entire hour-long webinar on it. You can find a lot, and so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because we talk about it a lot. But one of the important pieces of this is the sharing power. So Search Institute, who created this framework, looked at what is it that young people need from adults in relationships that they have in their lives in order to be successful and develop into their sort of whole, complete people. And so these are the 5 pieces, right? Expanding possibilities, providing support, expressing care, challenging growth, and sharing power. Sharing power is absolutely crucially important in order to develop young people who are full and complete adults and humans. It is, however, the part of this process that I found the program struggled the most with because they don't really understand what that looks like. How do we sort of share power with young people? How do we start to share power with our people that we're serving? Because in a lot of ways, organizations historically, whether it's nonprofits or any types of community service organizations or whatever it is, have not traditionally been designed in such a way as to share power with the people they're serving. It's just not been a common piece of the nonprofit social services story in America. And that's shifted a lot over the last, 5-10 years, especially. I spent a brief period of time working with folks in recovery from a substance use disorder. And a big part of that world right now, in the mental health treatment world as well, is incorporating, clients and client voice into the treatment services, right? Creating those types of things. And we're seeing some of that now with young people. And so with youth programs, thinking about, from top to bottom, every part of our program, every part of our organization, in what ways are we sharing power and creating opportunities for leadership with the young people that we're serving? And so just to put it into this context of, this is a, research-based framework for what young people need to be successful. And a big part of that is this idea of sharing power and elevating and encouraging them to take ownership of these programs. So I want to take a few minutes to watch this. Some of you may be familiar with critical mentoring. I think we've talked about it before. We've done some programs, and you may be familiar with Dr. Tori Wiesen-Surden's work. Mentor National is doing a lot of work with her right now to help expand some of her critical mentoring framework for other programs. This is a TEDx talk that she did a few years ago. It's about 8 minutes long. I don't think I'm going to show all of it, but we're going to get started and try to watch a chunk of it because I think it really helps set the stage for what we're talking about. All right, welcome back. I wasn't planning on showing the whole thing, and then just very powerful. So there's a few things I want to pull out from that. The first one is the mentoring really should be about helping young people, as Dr. Wiesen-Certain puts it, work with them to help them clear the air and purify the water around them. And so a big part of that is reconceptualizing what mentoring should be, right? And this is going back to this idea of mentoring not being about young people being passive recipients of mentoring, but active participants in everything that's happening as part of their program. And so the second piece that was mentioned is the idea of challenging the concept of adultism and institutional authority, right? And so, the idea of authority comes from lots of different ways and mechanisms at which we can sort of wield authority, right? We can have authority based on our education, having degrees in a certain topic. We can have authority based on our work experience, based on family, right? If we have a certain last name, they can grant us authority. If we went to a certain school, they can grant us authority. And a lot of that comes from simply being associated with institutions, right? And we need to challenge that as part of our work with young people, is that authority and what's the other word? But the idea that authority and knowledge and expertise isn't just inherent to you because you're proximate to leadership, because you have a title, right? It's about engaging with them so that they understand and that you understand that the authority that we wield is more about being in relationship with our young people and helping and being able to build them up, and not just because we happen to be older or have a degree or a title, right? And lastly, and probably most importantly, it's asking for and taking seriously youth input. I include taking seriously because I've found in some of my work that sometimes we'll ask for youth input, but we don't take it seriously, right? We'll survey them, we'll do like a focus group, but at the end of the day, we do kind of what we think is best. But we need to make sure we're taking it seriously, right? Because then we start getting into the realm of, tokenization and whether or not that we're really taking them seriously. If you are not that familiar with critical mentoring, I highly recommend reading the book. It's called Critical Mentoring, A Practical Guide by Dr. Tori Wiesen-Certain. There's also some information on our national website, and I'll be sure to share some resources around that with you, as well. But if you Google critical mentoring, the YouTube link for that video will come up, and you can find a lot of information about it from there. So I do want to think about different layers to this, right? As we think about how we engage young people, and I was saying before, we want to make sure we're helping them elevate their voice and expertise in all of the systems of our organization, right? Everything from top to bottom. We want to make sure that we're sharing that power with them as much as possible. And so it starts with not just our program, but our organization, right? We're part of some type of organization that's bigger than just our program, right? We have a board of directors, or we have an executive director, or whatever it is, however your organization is structured. If you're part of a school or government, there's some type of leadership structure in place. And we want to make sure that we're integrating young people into that organizational structure as much as possible. So we're going to start talking about that. Then we want to think about program operations, right? So elements of effective practice for mentoring, which I think most people should be familiar with, but if you're not, it's on our website. But the elements of effective practice for mentoring are our sort of benchmark standards for best practices for a mentoring program. It's broken into 6 sections. We have recruitment, screening, training, matching, monitoring and support, and closure. So I'm going to talk through each of those 6 about how we can make sure we're integrating youth voice in each of those 6 sections, those 6 elements. And then lastly, program evaluation. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. There's a whole webinar about program evaluation, but I think it's important to separate out a little bit because it's different and it's a really important mechanism to make sure that we're involving youth voice into. And so we'll talk about that when we get there as well. So let's dig into some of this organizational kind of structure, organizational management side of it. Again, as we're going, if you have any questions, please put them into the question box and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. So the first question you want to ask yourself with any type of organization that you're a part of is, who works for us, who's on our board? Are they reflective of the young people that we're serving? Are they reflective of the families that we're serving? This can be, racially or ethnic background if that's something that we would definitely want to consider. We want to make sure that we have, people of colors working for us, people who are on our board, particularly if our client population is predominantly young people of color. It could be other types of demographics, right? Thinking in terms of class background. I think a lot of times nonprofits have a tendency to make sure that we're only really thinking about the board in terms of, how can they provide to us in terms of like money. So a lot of nonprofit boards of directors will consist of a lot of very wealthy people. That's a very important part of running an organization, is making sure that we have the money to do our work. But we want to make sure there's also some type of representation from people that we're serving, the community that we're serving, right? And so with young people, it can get a little bit tricky in this way because, obviously we can't have people under 18 with fiduciary duties on a nonprofit board of directors. But there are ways to make sure that we're doing that. And we'll talk a bit about that. But ultimately, through having youth board members who are non-voting, but, are advisory members, having a separate youth advisory board, all of these are viable options for making sure that there's some type of representation of young people. You can also include parents of young people that you serve, people who work in the community in other organizations or in schools that you partner with, right? All these people are great to have in some type of advisory capacity. And again, sometimes we'll have some type of like program advisory committee, which I'm going to talk about more when we get to the program side. But I'm really talking about, your organizational management, right? Because we want to make sure that young people and the people that we're serving voice is heard in every function, every facet of our organization. That includes our budget, like our fundraising, all of these different pieces, right? How is funding pursued and prioritized? What types of organizations are we receiving funding from? I know that there's some organizations that receive money from large corporations that perhaps are doing harm to the communities that they're serving. And, those are questions and ethical issues that all of us have to deal with in our organization. And I'm not saying we should or shouldn't accept money from people who are offering it to us. Those are decisions that are made on an organizational level. However, what I am saying is that part of those decisions and deliberations should include the people who are living in the community and receiving services that are bearing the brunt of perhaps the harm that that company might be doing into the community, while turning around and giving you money to help solve the problems that they're creating, right? And so the people we serve, young people, are not blind to a lot of these dynamics. And so if we're turning around and accepting money from these companies or funders that are helping do harm to their community, that's going to harm our relationship. So all of these pieces we want to think about, again, from the top to the bottom. What are ways that we can engage young people in our processes? And thinking about not just from our board and fundraising perspective, but staffing, right? How are the young people we serve involved in our hiring processes? Not saying they necessarily have to have like final say on who you're hiring and firing and all of that, but there should be some type of mechanism by which you receive some type of feedback from people you serve on your hiring processes, on your kind of human resources piece. It doesn't have to be, all these don't have to be really intensive. You're not like every time you interview someone for a job, making sure that you are, having people, young people sitting in on your job interviews. That's not necessarily, going to be useful or productive for you, although it might. But having, involving them in reviewing of what your processes are, questions that you ask during the interview, they might want to have some feedback on. Talking to them about what staff they've enjoyed working with or ones that they haven't, and what sort of things they want you to look for in future staff members, right? Things like that can be a really powerful way to involve youth and share that power. Specifically, when we're talking about things like youth advisory board, we want to treat it like a program, right? We want to give it all of the care and thoughtfulness that we give our mentoring programs. That means not just bringing them in and having them sit there in the back of a room and being like, yes, we have 2, board members on our youth, or having a youth advisory board that meets, but they just kind of do their own thing. And, it's all very sort of like tokenized, right? They're just there to have it so we can say that we have it, so we can say we're doing this work. I've seen it done. I've done it myself in some work that I've done. It's a really easy habit to fall into, is to, again, ask for that feedback, ask for that help, but then not take it seriously. We want to really avoid that. We want to think about it in terms of skill development. So again, leadership development, making sure they're really engaged and talking about like, hey, this is our budget. Let's touch base after the board meeting to say, did you have any questions about what happened in there? Having adult mentors that are more experienced staff or board members who can have conversations with them, explain things, be a resource and a guide. All these are really great ways to engage young people in the work of running the organization, of being advisors, of getting experience in a way that's real and meaningful for them, but also actually useful and palatable for us as people running organizations without being too much of a drain on our time and energy. Some other organizational operation pieces, ways that you can involve young people, thinking about it in terms of, again, staff and board recruitment and onboarding, right? Should, having new staff or new board members meet with the young people, have conversations, is really helpful. If you're doing any type of strategic planning work, you should definitely be involving young people and the people that you're serving through focus groups, through surveys, a combination of all of those. And again, if you have the infrastructure in place to do some of this work, so if you have a sort of board, youth advisory board, youth advisory members already in place, it's gonna be that much easier when you're doing any type of strategic or tactical planning to go meet with them and say, you already have them picked. And so you'll be able to go into that room and, have that conversation. Some of this we already talked about, but youth feedback with staff management, right? As part of your performance review process, you might want to consider asking young people for feedback on your staff. It's one of any number of, ways to, obviously it shouldn't be like in the same way with any type of like staff review or staff management process, right? One data point isn't going to be everything, but is an additional data point to help you gather and engage with information on, what's really important in terms of, as you're thinking about doing staff management, staff reviews. If you have, again, that program review committee, program management meetings, those types of things, having young people sit in on those, having a few advisory members, things like that can be really powerful, both in terms of their own feeling ownership of the program. And there are so many times when I've been running a program where I was going to make a decision to move in a certain direction, when one of the people that we were serving was like, oh, you should definitely not do that because it'll totally backfire for these reasons. And it's like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that at all. Thank you for the feedback. It's really helpful. So it's really important to have that as well. And again, not just thinking about it in terms of, our program, but also development, fundraising. In my experience, particularly with youth programs, one of the main ways that young people get involved in fundraising is just when we put them in front of a crowd or on an appeal to try to get money, or put their picture on there, here's their story, have them give a little speech at a fundraiser. And it can feel very, tokeny, it can feel very disingenuous. The cure, for lack of a better word, that I've been able to kind of see work for that type of thing is engaging them, but really having conversations with them around like, hey, this is what we're doing. We're trying to raise money for this program. We think it'd be really powerful if you were to share some of your story. Is that okay with you? Really involve them in the process of, writing the appeal letter, planning the fundraiser, all of these different things, so that it's not just, we're trotting them out to share their heartbreaking story and shed some tears so people will break up their checkbooks and then they just go and that's all we talk about them. We want to make sure we're involving them, and that can help really make it feel a lot less exploitative, for lack of a better word. So on top of some of the organizational piece, again, specifically thinking about our program, right? How we're running programming. Our mentoring programs are one facet of our organization, but it's also really important to make sure, again, from every piece of it, we're engaging them. So all levels of our program, we want to engage young people with from start to finish, right? If we're thinking about it for a mentoring program, all the way from recruitment to closure, all the process in between, we want to make sure we're getting feedback and supporting them on giving us feedback on. So that means creating opportunities or promoting opportunities for leadership, right? We're bringing them in opportunities for them to take ownership, create activities, make decisions about what them and their mentor are going to do, or if it's a group mentoring program at a community center, what types of activities you're going to be doing. Is someone going to be leading a group activity? Let them choose and design it. All these opportunities, whenever there's an opportunity for some type of leadership, we want to make sure we're promoting it, encouraging it as much as possible. I think sometimes as adults we'll shy away from this because it's just sort of easier and cleaner to do it ourselves. It's a few less steps, and so we have a million things going on, so we don't want to take that time because we don't have a lot of time. But where we can, it's really important to do it. And something really simple is just roundtable sessions to encourage feedback, right? Quarterly, once or twice a year, have some type of focus group roundtable session with your mentees just to get feedback about the program. Like, what do they think is going well? What do they think you can improve on? What are some suggestions that they might have? And so even just the act of encouraging this will also encourage them to provide that feedback between these meetings, right? They'll just come up to you and say, I have a little bit of feedback for you, because you create that culture of receiving feedback, right? So we want to make sure we're encouraging them as much as possible. So let's talk through the elements of effective practice, right? So the first one is recruitment. So we're thinking about recruiting both mentors and mentees, but we're thinking about mentors specifically. We want to think about, what are you looking for in their mentors? What are they identifying as attributes, backgrounds that they want to be able to see in their mentors, right? And remember, for all of this, we're sharing power, right? We're not holding all the power, but we're also not giving it all away. We're having conversation, we're being in relationship with them and coming up with mutually agreeable outcomes. It's not about creating any type of hierarchy. It's about meeting people in the middle and having real relationships and conversations. So when we're asking young people for, hey, what are you looking for in a mentor? That doesn't mean we're just going to take everything they said and only find mentors that fit that criteria, right? But we do want to make sure we're taking it seriously and weighing it equally against what we think is best. And as well as, engaging with their parents or other stakeholders to say, these are the things that they think is best. We can encourage them to tap their networks, right? One of the big things that's really important, particularly as we think about the intersection of mentoring and racial equity, and we've talked about this before, specifically in mentoring boys and young men of color. But that's really encouraging them to understand and act on the social capital that they already have in place, right? Sometimes mentoring programs can make young people feel like the social capital that they have, the networks they move in, aren't as worthwhile as the ones the mentoring program can give them access to. And again, a lot of times that can look and feel and sound a lot like your community is less important than these, middle to upper class white people that are volunteers for us, that they're the ones who are going to open your doors. And we don't want to cheapen the social networks that they have and the social capital they have in their communities by suggesting that it's less important than the social capital that we're giving them through our program. And so encouraging them to recruit and talk to people through their own sort of networks and social capital, even if a lot of mentors don't come from it, but equipping them with the skills to have those conversations is really, really powerful. And again, helping them feel ownership of the program, as well as recruiting mentors who might be more receptive to their recruitment, particularly mentors of color. Bringing them to recruitment events, similar to the sort of development fundraising type piece, we want to make sure that they're an active part of this. So just having them come along, if we're presenting to a group about the importance of volunteering and mentoring, if you're tabling at some volunteer fair, whatever it is, have a couple mentees come and meet people. They can talk about themselves, they can talk about the program, because if we're coaching them and involving them in the program operations before this, they're going to be just as equipped to have that conversation as a mentor would. And very frequently we'll encourage mentors to attend these types of events. But we want to make sure we're doing it with mentees as well too, right? Because they are just as much of a part of this process as the mentors are. And even for mentee recruitment, using the mentees to recruit other mentees, have really conversations with them around, hey, what are people that you're seeing, young people in your community, in your circles that you're talking to that I'm not, what needs are they expressing? What dynamics are you seeing? Do you think they would be a good fit for this program? Equip them to have those types of conversations. Screening. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about screening mentors. We're involving young people in designing those materials and questions, right? We'll have a written application. We'll have interview questions that we're having with them, or written questions, or whatever it is. Have the young people provide impact or insight onto those questions. What types of things do they think are important for you to know about the adults that you're putting in their lives? So if you're trying to screen out who would be a good fit and who wouldn't, what do they think would make someone a good fit to mentor them? And you can include that on the application. You can have them participate in the interview process. Again, all of these are just extra data points. And we've talked about screening before. If you were on any of our webinars, we talked about screening. A lot of it is about creating as many data points as possible to inform your decision on screening. So there's no one thing that's going to, well, I shouldn't say there's no one thing. There are some bright line things that you would screen out, particularly if it comes back on a background check and things like that. But for the most part, outside of those, major history of violence against children or something like that, once they clear that level, there's not necessarily going to be those bright line, these are things you should or shouldn't do. And so having youth input is just one more data point that's going to help you figure out the best way to screen in and out mentors. And if again, making those recommendations, we want to make sure we're taking them seriously. We're not just asking them to say we asked them, we're asking them to take seriously their input and what they have to say, right? We want to make sure that we're really, really listening. So training. Again, mentees identifying what are some topics that they would like to see their mentors be trained on. What types of things have they noticed maybe mentors really struggled with or needed extra support on? Maybe it's, they really, really had a tough time engaging with like my parents. They know how to do that. Could you do some training about like, family engagement? Because it was always awkward when they would talk to my parents and it was just uncomfortable for me. Or, it really, really struggled for the first month to have really a relationship because they just didn't really know how to talk to me as like a kid. And it made it really hard for us to really open up. Maybe you could have some conversations with them around, active listening and relationship building, pieces like that. Even having them come in and be trainers and presenters as part of your mentor training, especially if there are topics around like, engaging and talking to young people. Having a young person talk about it is going to be really helpful in making it feel really real and, more helpful. And as on top of just mentor training, we want to make sure that any sort of mentee orientation or training is reviewed and updated. We're getting their feedback on those to say what other things we want to see, what other topics, what's important to you. Those should always be reviewed and updated, particularly with mentee feedback. And again, having more experienced people, young people in your program, more experienced mentees who've been involved or maybe aged out or graduated, be part of that process is going to go a long way as well. So let's talk about matching. One of the ways in matching that I've seen some programs do is youth-directed matching. So have some type of mechanism where the young people are able to review or view the mentors like on a website or do like a group type thing. I don't know, like an event, right, where they're kind of doing like a speed mentoring type thing, but that the young people are the ones deciding who they want to get matched with. There are some, I would say this is the type of thing that doesn't work for most programs, but if you're a program that you think could pull this off, it can be a really powerful way to do it. I've seen it work well, especially with older students, like high school age, even college age type programs, particularly if they're focused around some type of like college career readiness, professionalism, professional identity, that type of thing. It can be a really powerful experience and a way to do it. Ask for and seriously consider youth preferences and who they're matched with, right? Are they requesting some of the specific backgrounds or experiences or, whatever it is. And again, you don't have to always give them exactly what they want, partially because you just might not have a mentor available who would fit all of it, or, you think that someone might just be a really good fit otherwise. But it's always good to ask and to try to, accommodate those when you can. Particularly when it comes to, and this is in our elements of effective practice, particularly focused on mentoring boys and men of color, is honoring mentee and family preferences for mentors who share racial ethnic background, if possible. Can be really important for them. So youth-initiated mentoring is a specific model of mentoring program. Happy to share more resources with this if you reach out afterwards, if you're really curious how it works. Our mentor affiliate in Nebraska and Omaha does a lot of work around this, and I think it's a really interesting and cool model, and I haven't worked with it directly that much. But the idea is that you don't recruit mentors to be part of the program. You coach and support young people, the mentees, with the skills to go out and find their own mentors, and they get either looped into the program directly. So then, then they would come through your sort of like process and then be part of your program, or they're just, especially for, again, maybe like college age students, young adults, we're giving them the skills to find these people who are going to support them throughout their career process, because these are the types of things that, think about it from the skill perspective. When someone's an adult, we want to make sure that they have the ability to go out, find people who can support them, create those mentoring type relationships, so that way they can spend a lot of time building their sort of like, their personal network, right? Grow their own social capital. So it's that skill building to be able to do the mentoring even after they age out of your program. And then lastly, making sure we're really focused on the matching is a process of them enhancing their social capital. So making sure we're helping them build, maintain, support relationships with adults in their life. All right, monitoring and support. So monitoring and support, we want to make sure a lot of things that I've seen typically focus with programs on the monitoring and support for mentors, right? We'll check in with mentors, see how things are going. We're supporting them in the relationship. We're providing them opportunities to connect, but we rarely provide those similar opportunities to our mentees, right? We're not necessarily calling up the mentees and just saying, hey, how's your mentor? How's the match going? Are you feeling good about it? Some of us might do it with families and parents and guardians, and that's great too. But having that direct conversation with mentees is really, really important. We want to make sure we're getting their feedback on how things are going. Are things going well? Are they not? What type of support do you need? Those type of things can be really helpful. And similarly with those sort of peer sharing and check-ins with mentees, right? We'll really encourage a lot of programs to do that with mentors, where periodically they'll have mentors all come together, share struggles or successes, be able to offer resources and advice to each other, all types of things. And it can be really great to have mentees have that type of experience as well, to be able to come together and just talk about how things are going, have some built-in peer support as well. The mentee feedback on the mentor, right? If you're looking for things, especially as a program manager, if you're kind of supervising all these mentors, we want to make sure that we're getting feedback about them, about what they might be struggling with, what extra support they might need. And so getting that from the mentee or families can be really helpful as well, because it's really going to help you stave off any major red flags, major issues by having those conversations early and being able to do that. And again, just generally checking in consistency, having that relationship. Again, a lot of mentoring programs will check in really consistently with the mentors, have those conversations, engage with them, support them, but the mentees might only see the program coordinator like once or twice a year, and that's it, right? We want to make sure we're having that relationship with them as well, supporting them as well, and making sure that they're getting what they need from the mentoring relationship from their perspective. And closure. So a lot of times when we talk about closure, we're talking a lot about from the mentor side, right? We're equipping the mentors with the skills to have conversation with their mentees around the relationship ending, right? It's a hard conversation to say goodbye, particularly for planned closure, because there's a certain sense of like, no one wants to address the elephant in the room. We know our relationship's coming to an end, but we're just kind of awkward about it. So as the program, we'll equip the mentors with the skills and language to have that conversation with the mentees. But we can also start to have conversation with some of the mentees around preparing them to understand what closure is going to look like, and maybe initiate some of that conversation. I still think most of the onus of having that conversation, initiating it, should fall on the mentor, largely because it should happen in the confines of their relationship as much as possible. But we can just make sure that we're equipping, challenging the mentees to be able to do that as well. If there's instances of unplanned closure, so if a mentor has to leave, or is fired from the program for whatever reason, I'm sure you have, or you should have, if you don't, some type of policy and procedure in place that says like what happens in the instance of an unplanned closure. Are they rematched? Are they connected with staff? Like who's having those conversations? All of that. But we should make sure with that process that whatever those procedures are centering young people, their needs and requests around what they need to be successful. And some of that might look different for different youth depending on who they are. If there's instance of unplanned closure, and we want to make sure we're respecting that. So as part of your policy and procedure should be some type of conversation with the mentee around what do you need, what can we do to support you? And that might mean that your procedure following unplanned closure is not one size fits all, so much as it is a couple different options, but we want to make sure that we're centering them around and allowing them to self-advocate on what they need in instances of unplanned closure. And lastly, when it comes to closure, we also want to make sure that's about celebrating, right? So a lot of times we'll have mentors and mentees share about what they appreciated about each other and kind of celebrate the relationship. And it's a really great way to end out, right? Having time to talk about the things we thought were important and helpful with each other. But we also want to make sure that the young people are equipped to talk about their own growth and development, right? We want to make sure they feel equipped, have the language and the space to say, like, I've grown in this way, I've seen myself develop in this way, and advocate for themselves a little bit there. And that can be really powerful. So the last piece I want to talk about is just this program evaluation piece. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's one of the most important, but also one of the easiest ways to involve young people in your program and to elevate that youth voice is in our sort of continuous quality improvement endeavors. So in your program, you should have some type of quality improvement process, right? Some type of review, some type of way of looking at our outcomes and analyzing our program in order to create improvements. And it should all start from your theory of change and your logic model. I am hoping that all of you for your program have some type of documented theory of change and logic model. If you don't, I did a whole webinar specifically about them like a month or two ago. It's recorded. We'll make sure you get the link to that. But the idea of the theory of change is just, this is our theory of the intervention impact that we're making. So, we take young people and we provide them with social capital and access to career internships. And we believe that through the opening of social capital, as well as the skills to efficiently navigate those new social relationships, leads to increased career potential when they move into the workforce, right? But a lot of mentoring programs' theory of change is just, they haven't really thought about it. It's just we take a young person, we take an adult, we put them together, and we think good things are just going to happen. That's our theory of change. But we have to make sure it's more thoughtful than that. And so there's some great resources about that. Again, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it because we did a whole long webinar about it, and you can watch that. It'll go way more in depth. But making sure that what your theory of change and logic model is incorporating, what young people are saying and seeing that they value from your program or what they're actually getting out of it. And the only way you're really going to know that is by asking them. And sometimes those are our sort of pre-post test surveys, things like that really help us measure outcomes, which are really powerful and really useful. But we also want to make sure that we are, having these sort of, qualitative conversations with them that are just about, what does this program mean to you? What are you getting out of it? What do you want to see happen? What can we be doing differently? And really helping that to lead to our identification of our program goals. We might have a set of goals or outcomes that we think we're doing or think are important, and then we have a conversation with the mentees, and all of a sudden that shifts because after talking to them, we realize, what we thought we were doing doesn't really make sense right now. We need to be moving in a different direction. Or, we thought we were doing this intervention, but really we've had really powerful outcomes in this other area, and maybe we need to shift what we measure to reflect what we're actually really good at and the impact that we're really, deeper impact that we're having in this different area. But again, you're not going to know that unless you're having those sort of open-ended conversations with your mentees. You may have heard this quote before. I think it's a really powerful sort of way to kind of keep this in mind, but nothing about us without us, right? If you're having conversations about young people, they should be there. If you're talking about evaluating outcomes, then those young people should be involved in those conversations. Any sort of conversation you're having about that's going to impact the mentees and clients that you're serving, or whatever you want to call them, whatever young people you're working with, they should have some type of representation and presence at that table. It's really important, both in terms of optimal outcomes, as well as it's just, one of the ways that we're going to be able to make sure that we're having the best impact in creating the fullest young people that we can and creating a more just and equitable society around it, right? We're modeling that these are people that we care about, these are views that we care about, and these are pieces that we want to make sure that we are engaging with. So lastly, I was going to try to share a video about empowerment evaluation, which is the model by Dr. David Fetterman. I highly recommend reading about this. I was trying to find a video, but they were all either like just wouldn't have worked, or they're like an hour-long presentations by him about it. So I didn't get a chance to find one to show, but I highly recommend doing it. It's a model of program evaluation that really focuses on in making sure that the young people, or any type of people that are being served, are engaged in the process to do it. And really it helps them not just be engaged in the process, but take ownership and leadership over navigating a lot of those, a lot of the actual evaluation process, right? So having stakeholders involved through focus groups, through identification of outcomes, all these pieces, and helping them really take ownership of the evaluation process. So I highly recommend reading more about the empowerment evaluation. Dr. Wiesenserter talks a lot about methods and ways to do this in the critical mentoring book, Practical Guide. So I highly recommend reading through that as well. But those are just some really great tools, hopefully that'll help you figure out, how to best incorporate some youth voice through our program evaluation processes. So I have one more video just to kind of close out with, just young people talking about why it's important to do this. So give me one moment. All right. So I'm going to open up for questions. This is a QR code to access our sort of post survey. You can take out your phone and kind of point it at it. and it'll pop up a little link to go to SurveyMonkey, but you'll also receive it in a follow-up email by the end of the week. So, don't worry too much if it doesn't work. But I'll leave that up for a second. I'll pause here for, I'll put questions in the question box. I'm happy to answer them. You will get the slides as well as a link to the recording as well, so don't worry about that. The last thing I'll share is our contact information. So if you do want to reach out with any more questions, please let me know. I'm going to put my email into the little chat here. It should pop up for you. But you can reach out to me or anyone else from our team about any questions. If you want to, explore some strategies for putting some more of this stuff in action, happy to do that as well. But I'll pause here, and if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the question box. I see there was a couple that got put in while I was presenting, so I'll review those as well. So I see a couple of the questions that got put in here specifically about doing youth advisory boards. I don't want to get too in the weeds on it, but we definitely have recommendations and thoughts about what that should look like and ways to structure that. So if you want to reach out afterwards and let us know, we can have a really specific conversation around youth advisory boards. I've found that one of the biggest pieces is I'm trying to think of a better way to say it, but just convincing the people with decision-making power that it's worthwhile, right? And so being able to share some information on, why it's important, how it's can boost outcomes, all these different things. We're happy to help you come up with a strategy on how to do that, because sometimes it's difficult to convince them that it's worth the investment of time and energy. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I will close up. If you do need anything else or have any further questions, please reach out to us if something comes up or if you want extra support. For those of you who don't know, we do offer individual consultations with mentoring programs. So if you have questions about really anything related to your program, it doesn't have to be about this, please just let me know. We're happy to just set up a time to talk. It's our job to be a resource for you. It's our job to support you on managing your programming. So, please reach out. That's what we're here for. If you do have anything else you need, let me know. And then again, if you could fill out this survey, again, you can scan the QR code here, or you'll get the link in your email in the next few days. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week. I appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us.